right, I'm going to be respectful of everyone's time here and get started. So once again, thanks to everyone for attending the 2023 Lumsden and McCormick Exempt Conference. It's hard to believe we've been doing this for 30 years, but we have been. So thanks again to everyone for joining. Most of you know I'm Maria Gambacorta, the Director of Marketing here at Lumsden and McCormick, and I'm going to be the host for today's webinar. Again, just some quick housekeeping items. We're recording this session right now, and the slide deck will be available. We'll send an email communicating all the recordings and the slide decks for the sessions for the conference. You can expect that probably on Tuesday. Chat and Q&A are enabled. Sarah Dayton, our managing partner, is going to manage those. So if you have questions, we will answer them throughout. So please use the Q&A for that. And if you have any questions for me regarding administration of the conference or CPE questions, etc., please put them in the chat and I will reply to you. We are offering 1 hour of CPE credit. So please be conscious of the 5 polling questions. This session has 5. It's best to answer all of them, and we'll send you a certificate within 30 days, and that will come from Prolera, our CPE software. There is an evaluation that will launch immediately after you close this window. It may open in a new window, so you might want to look for that. We've had a couple comments on that regarding that, so make sure you look for a new window. That's it. That's all I have for housekeeping. So again, like I said, I'm happy to pass the baton on to Sarah Dayton, who's our managing partner. I know many of you work with her. As you know, Sarah has extensive experience serving exempt organizations, including governmental entities and nonprofits. So Sarah, I will pass it over to you.
Thank you, Maria. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for sticking with us to our final session of our exempt conference. I would like to introduce Daniel Montante and Megan Morris-Smith. Dan is president and co-founder of Montante Solar, where he is responsible for overseeing company operations, strategic direction, and client satisfaction and retention. He'll go more into the details of his role in a moment, but from a community perspective, Dan is also involved as president of the New York Solar Energy Industries Association, as chair of the Superintendent's Advisory Committee on Occupational Education for Buffalo Public Schools, and as a board member with Art Park and the Arts Service Initiative of Western New York. He earned his MBA at Wake Forest University and his bachelor's at Skidmore College. Our second presenter is Megan Morris-Smith. Megan is a member of our tax team here at Lumsden, working with both businesses and individuals. Her focus is on commercial clients, including S-Corps, C-Corps, and partnerships. She also works on consolidated companies, manufacturers, real estate, and service-type companies. In addition, Megan works on research and development, or R&D, tax credits and incentives for startups and commercial businesses. With that, Dan, I'll turn it over to you for further introduction. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. I appreciate that introduction. Just another 1 or 2 items. Montante Solar, my company, we focus almost exclusively on commercial industrial scale solar projects. What that means is we're typically not building residential scale solar projects. And from an industry perspective, as Sarah mentioned, I'm also the president of the board of directors for the New York Solar Energy Industries Association. We're New York's trade organization that represents about 260 member companies, or about 11,500 solar workers across the United States. So very happy to be here today and looking forward to getting into the content.
All right, and then I'm going to go ahead and just kind of kick things off first with a poll. So we could just go to the next slide and launch the poll. So are you attending this webinar to earn CPE credit today? And there should just be a pop-up on your screen. So please select that to make sure you get your CPE credit today.
We'll give it another 30 seconds, everyone. Most people are filling it out. I'm not gonna share these results. It's not necessary. So, I'm gonna give it, another second. We'll end the poll and then Megan, you can continue on.
Yeah.
Okay, I ended the poll. Thank you.
All right, so now that we've finished that first poll in question, we're gonna just kind of kick things off with a little intro for why going solar. So Dan, if you want to move to the next slide. All right, so obviously with the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act, that was one of the kind of largest bills that the government has ever passed to kind of promote green energy, and it has a lot of new credits and things like that. So even though solar has been around for many years, I feel like it's even getting a new revised discussion as part of this new act. So if you go solar, it can help you, lock in long-term rates and decrease operating expenses when it comes to your energy production. So it can be a great return on your investment that way. Also now, with the investment tax credit, you can get a 30% tax credit, and we're going to be going over some incentives for tax exempt organizations specifically that the Inflation Reduction Act really helped with that. In addition to those federal incentives, there's also some state incentives from NYSERDA, and it allows all for a great return on your solar investment. In some cases now, it kind of brings that break-even point even lower compared to than it ever used to be before. So it's a really great time to go solar. Not as relevant for tax exempt organizations, but there is a lot of great federal bonus depreciation and accelerated New York State depreciation that you're able to kind of take on investments in solar projects. So if we have any for-profit companies kind of on, that's more relevant for you. And then there is kind of a new topic in the accounting industry, or just industries in general, that's kind of focusing on environmental social governance goals. So solar can help you and your company and your organization reduce your carbon footprint, and it can help show your consumers and your stakeholders or people that are kind of observing your organization from the outside that you're committed to renewable energy and enhancing your environment, or lowering your environmental impact to help with green energy initiatives.
So, when we talk about solar as a potential project opportunity, we're going to talk a lot about what the benefits are from an environmental and financial perspective. But just to kind of get everyone grounded, we'd like to provide a little insight on what some of the key ingredients are for a good solar project. And when talking about solar, you either typically site them on top of a roof or in an open space, a field, for instance. But if you're building a project on site, on a roof, what you want to have are large open spaces. And I think that should be fairly obvious for you as to why you want to have a good amount of space to site your solar panels and other requisite equipment. And also another consideration to keep in mind is projects that are owner occupied, buildings that are owner occupied, tend to be the easiest projects as opposed to a tenant versus landlord relationship, because then you have kind of a complexity associated with that sort of transaction. And the tenant may want solar, but maybe the building doesn't want to push that on the building. So keep that in mind in terms of what would make a good solar project. From a structural perspective, the reality is that we can almost in all cases interconnect the solar project. We on occasion do have issues though where the building structure itself cannot accommodate or hold the solar project. A roof on a solar project will typically add between 3.5 and 5 pounds a foot. And what that means is older buildings tend to be the best buildings for solar. Newer buildings tend to be engineered right to code. That's not always the case, and sometimes things can be structurally reinforced for not a lot of cost. But ideally, you want to build your building does be built for 3.5 to 5 pounds. And any solar company would bring a PE to validate that. In terms of roof orientation, flat rooftops are great. However, pitched roofs also work well as long as they face either south, east, or west. With one thing we want to avoid are a pitched roof that's facing north. And then of course we want to make sure that we're not installing on a very steep slope, and that tends to make for an easier installation. Financial ingredients, the financial investment tax credit is really a key one right now. And one that previously was not able to be recognized in the not-for-profit or exempt world, now it is. And I know Megan's going to talk about that in a moment. Let me move on. Let me give you a sense of some of the projects that we have built over the years. And, I want these hopefully will give you some sense of the types of projects that would work for any sort of exempt organization. Starting with the bottom left, we had built a portfolio of projects on behalf of the Buffalo School District. In aggregate, this was a 3 megawatt system spread across 19 schools in the city of Buffalo. Even though the project is about 5 years old now, it's still the largest K-12 solar project in state. And this is, we're seeing more and more school districts going solar, especially now with the adoption of the Inflation Reduction Act. On the right side, we actually are looking at 2 solar projects, the first of which is in the foreground. These are the bread and butter rooftop commercial solar project that we love to get involved with. Single tenant or owner occupied. This just so happens to be an Amazon delivery station in the town of Tonawanda. Great project that really does showcase an easy application for solar. In the background of that picture, you see a large solar field. That's a 6 megawatt solar project. All that power is being delivered to Corning Glass. They are the user of the solar project. And these projects are, depending on the size of your organization, certain school districts could utilize that size project. But there might be also other exempt organizations that would be in the same situation. The top left corner picture just kind of showcases something that's kind of important to us in our company. This is a project that we built on behalf of Buffalo Computer Graphics. Love the building, love the setting for the project, and we did what we could to make sure the solar project didn't detract from that, and we feel that the project actually adds to the aesthetic value of that site. I know we're going to ask about the polling questions, but just want to remind everyone that if you have questions for the presenters, either Megan or I, would just encourage you to ask those in the chat on a real-time basis. We'd happier to take questions on a real-time basis as opposed to the end. So on to polling question number 2. Are you familiar with the federal investment tax credits associated with solar energy projects? Yes or no?
All right, I'm gonna give it another few seconds, everyone, and then we'll close out the poll. I will share these results, everyone, and the poll, and here's the results.
Okay. Well, that's a good transition. So now we're going to start to get into the financial incentives associated with solar projects. But let's just kind of ground everyone first and make sure everyone's on the same page for how a project owner will recognize the return on their investment in a solar project. There are really 4 ways that a solar project delivers a financial return. The first one should be obvious to everyone. Clearly, a company or an organization is going to see energy savings. They're going to see their costs that they're paying to RG&E, National Grid, whoever the utility is, decline in a significant way. Energy savings is the #1 way that a project delivers a payback. The second way is through the receipt of state incentives. In New York, NYSERDA is the agency that is charged with supporting renewable energy projects, and NYSERDA does pay cash incentives, and we're going to talk in detail about those. Megan's then going to talk in detail about the new and improved federal investment tax credit, and not just the base tax credit, but all the various adders that can come with different solar projects, depending on how they're built and where they're sited. And then, to the extent it's applicable, depreciation is a driver of financial return. Solar projects are eligible for bonus depreciation on the federal side and MACRS depreciation on the state side. We're not going to talk about depreciation a whole lot today, given that this is a focus on exempt organizations, but for your non-exempt friends out there, depreciation is a major driver. Okay, let's start with the New York State incentives and how NYSERDA or New York State does support solar projects. NYSERDA has been a great partner to the renewable energy industry for years, and I'm going to walk you through how the incentives work. So NYSERDA will incentivize virtually any solar project that is submitted to them, and they have different types of incentives. Okay, so for the bread and butter commercial rooftop projects out there, these are projects that are between 50 kW, 50 kilowatts, and 750 kilowatts in size. They will pay a 25-cent per watt incentive. I know you may not be familiar with what that means in terms of percentage offset. That's about a 13 or 14% incentive. They are actually just writing a check for about we'll call 15% of the project cost. For ground mount projects, the incentive is not as lucrative on an absolute dollar perspective, but it does work for ground projects in that ground projects tend to be larger and thus have a lower overall cost. So that 18-cent per watt incentive, again, does represent somewhere in the neighborhood of between 10 and 20% of the 10 to 15% of the project cost. And that's a base incentive that's going to be there. For affordable housing providers, there is a multifamily affordable housing incentive that equates to $1 a watt. That is approximately 50% of project costs. So it's a huge incentive. And from a policy perspective, I think this is very well aligned with the goals of the CLCPA, and that New York State is going to do everything they can to support affordable housing and the benefits of renewable energy on affordable housing. So multifamily affordable housing is a great candidate for solar. The state also has a variety of adders, financial adders. They will provide to owners that are advancing projects that fit certain criteria. The first of which, if you site your project on a brownfield site, a remediated brownfield site, they will provide a 15-cent per watt adder. It isn't just a brownfield site. Landfills are also eligible for this, and the incentive is there to recognize that when building on old industrial sites or landfills, the cost of construction is higher. You have to liaise, you have to work with the DEC. The way you approach a project is different. You may not be able to penetrate the ground. So there is an extra incentive available to support sites that are built, solar projects built on brownfield sites or landfills. Community solar. I'm sure most people have heard about community solar in the state by now. Community solar projects also do earn an adder. We're not going to talk about that in depth today because I don't think it's really appropriate for this topic. And then the inclusive community solar adder is community solar in essence for folks living in affordable housing. The takeaway from this slide is the state is a great partner for solar projects, and whether you're just going after the base incentive or have a special set of circumstances that allow you to go after any of the adders, it's a great time to be building projects in New York State. Okay, Megan.
All right, thanks, Dan, for going over the state incentives. So now we're going to kind of jump into the federal incentives that were expanded by the Inflation Reduction Act. So now the base credit is going to be 30% based on labor requirements. So what those labor requirements are is basically that you're paying a prevailing wage and that you're kind of maintaining all the records to certify that as you're installing this solar project. So that's not going to be a huge hurdle to meet, as a lot of, anyone like Montanti is going to kind of keep track of that prevailing wage and make sure they're paying it to make sure you can meet the full ITC. And then in addition to that, there's kind of some adders that we're going to be going over on the next slide that will kind of help increase your benefit up to potentially a maximum of 70%. This investment tax credit is basically a credit on your investment. So it's going to be computed on the total cost of the eligible property that you're going to capitalize And you'll be able to claim that credit when you place it in service. For exempt organizations, you'll be able to get a refund on it kind of once you place that project right in service. So it'll be a great initial return right there. It's not super important for tax exempt organizations, but there is an adjustment to your depreciable basis based on the amount of credit claimed. The other option when you have a solar project is to do the production tax credit. So basically the difference between these two, investments kind of based on the initial investment and cost in the property, where production would be based on kind of what those panels are producing after they're already installed. So given where we are in the country and our amount of sunlight and things like that, most people, or pretty much 100% of the time, you're going to pick the investment tax credit when it comes to a solar project over the production tax credit, but there is some information there, kind of just what that, what the production tax credit would be if you would claim that, but you're generally always going to see investment tax credit pretty much in New York State, in Western New York. So now kind of moving on, getting into what some of those adders are. So, this first adder sort of relates to domestic content of the project, and if the content materials for the project is sourced domestically, it gives you a benefit. Unfortunately, right now, given kind of the climate, usually for this benefit, it's going to kind of cost you more than what your benefit will actually get to make sure those materials are coming from the United States, but maybe kind of going forward in the future, that might shift. The second benefit, it would be an energy community. It's for 10%. So this would be, if you have a brownfield site, if you are close to a coal power plant, which we'll kind of be getting in some maps, but you'll actually see that there was the Huntley Power Plant in town of Tonawanda that was closed. So there's actually some areas, kind of in the city and surrounding suburbs around that power plant in Tonawanda that actually qualify to be an energy community. And then there is a qualification that if you are in a significant area of unemployment for fossil fuels, which qualifies as most of the southern tier, and there'll be a map for this too, you can help kind of qualify for that 10% adder as well. So these first two, the domestic content and the energy community, anyone that's doing a solar project, as long as they meet the requirements for each of these, can get those additional adders. So it can be very easy to kind of get those ones right off the bat. The next one, the low income community, that can either be 10% or 20%. So the 10% for this would be, if a facility is going to be, your project is going to be installed in a low income community, that would just get you 10%. 20%, how you would hit that threshold is if you're doing a low income housing project in those communities. So this number 3 here is going to be limited allocation, and it's going to be a competitive solicitation for this. So it's going to be an application process administered by the Department of Energy. And the application is going to contain information around what kind of category. There's going to be 4 different categories to apply for, kind of ownership about the project, location of the project, and kind of like size and capacity. So this is new. They just accepted kind of the first round of applications on October 19th. So this is still kind of like unknown because it's so new, exactly how competitive it's going to be, how difficult it's going to be to kind of get those additional adders. So there kind of be more knowledge to learn as those programs kind of progress and you get through a couple rounds of those to get those benefits. So here is a map of the energy communities. So this will kind of show some areas. So obviously, the southern tier there is mostly purple because they qualify as that energy community. And then the next slide will kind of zoom in on Western New York. And you can kind of see, or the, I guess, more Buffalo-based area, and you can kind of see where the power plant was and then the surrounding area. So it actually covers, quite a good region. So as long as your organization is kind of within those confines, or the project that you would be doing is within those confines, it can be an easy way to kind of qualify for those extra add-ons for the credit.
Yeah, just to make sure everyone can kind of get oriented here. This is Grand Island, in case you can't, just to get you oriented. The Huntley, the now closed Huntley Power Plant is along the river, just a little bit south of Grand Island. And any any project cited in a census tract that contained the Huntley Power Plant or in a census tract maybe adjacent to that of the Huntley Power Plant would qualify as an energy community and thus receiving that 10% ITC adder. Just to kind of provide some context, what we have here on this slide are New York State school districts that are in energy communities. Now, I know most of the folks on the line are not representing their school district. However, you probably know what school districts nearby. So there are 90 school districts that are technically considered energy communities, thus they receive an automatic 40% tax credit when doing any sort of renewable energy project. This is just meant to be a little bit of a guide map for how you can determine whether or not your site would be eligible as an energy community. Okay, I think on to polling question number 3. Is your organization located in an energy community? And I'm going to move the slide back just so you can take a look at the school districts.
We'll give it about 10 more seconds, everyone.
Interesting. It's interesting and encouraging. Okay. Megan.
All right, so kind of once you determine, or if you have any adders or anything like that, there's a new feature that makes it really beneficial for tax exempt organizations, and that's elective pay. It's also kind of known as direct pay. I think kind of initially when this was passed, everybody was sort of calling it direct pay of the ITC, but all the IRS language is now switching to kind of elective pay. So both terminology, if you hear it, it's generally meaning kind of the same thing. So to qualify for elective pay, you need to basically be a tax exempt or government entity. So that means either tax exempt organizations, state and local governments, or Indian tribal governments. So for tax exempt organizations, I know sometimes with various credit programs and incentives, it's confusing about which ones you meet. So this is really anyone under 501A. So that's going to be all of your 501c organizations, such as public charities, private foundations, social welfare organizations, labor organizations. It really kind of covers the full gamut of kind of tax exempt organizations, since it's pretty much everyone under 501A. And then for state and local governments, this is kind of state political subdivisions and agencies and instrumentalities are all eligible. So that would mean, cities, counties, water districts, school districts, economic development agencies. So they really have made this available to a lot of different types of tax exempt and state and local government organizations. So there's a lot of people that can get a benefit from this new elective pay feature. So kind of to claim this, there's going to be, a couple different steps to doing this. So one is to complete an IRS pre-registration process. So I have kind of TBD on there because we're still sort of waiting IRS guidance and knowledge about this. They're supposed to release more information in late 2023. So obviously it's December 1st. So hopefully that comes out soon. So they only have 31 more days to technically meet their initial deadline. But as part of this, you're going to be, providing information about who's going to claim the credit, the type of credit that you intend to claim, the eligible project and property that will continue or contribute to that credit. And then once you complete this pre-registration process and get approved for it, the IRS is going to issue you a registration number, and that registration number will be included with your credit claim on the tax return. So it's just kind of noting, if you're planning to look at a solar project, that eventually, once obviously the IRS releases more guidance on this and it establishes official timeline, you're going to make sure you want that registration number before you need to file your tax return, because you'll need it by kind of the extended due date of your tax return. So hopefully more information about that process comes out soon. Kind of once you register, claiming the credit's actually fairly easy. You're just going to file a form, Form 3800. That's kind of where the credit's going to ultimately flow to, and make sure you claim it for elective pay. So, you know, if your client or your accountant will help you with that, obviously with the filing of your 990T, and then you'll be able to kind of get your refund. Just to note, you know, you are going to be able to have multiple facilities and locations for this credit. So if you're kind of doing a project that's maybe spread across, you know, multiple locations, there's just going to be some additional information that you might need to kind of disclose with that form. So all of this is all subject to change because all of these forms are just kind of in draft for 2023. So we'll kind of see and be able to evolve and see how that moves going forward.
Megan, can I interrupt for 1 second? If we can
Yeah.
go back, I'm sorry, Dan, for a second. Also, obviously for governments, you are not used to having to file any forms like this with the IRS. So again, all new, as Megan mentioned, this is, there's not a lot of guidance out yet on this. I did reach out to the New York State Education Department to see what this would do because of aid and what happens if you're also getting some federal credits. They have not gotten back to me yet. They promised to get back to me next week. So hopefully more to come shortly on that, but we understand that that would be a big question for the governments on the line.
Yep, and then just 2 other quick things. So kind of once you file, you're gonna have to wait for the IRS to process it to be able to get your refund there. So just we have a kind of a note on there that, you know, there might be a loan likely needed to kind of bridge the timing of the receipt for the tax credit from the IRS. And just today we're mostly focused on solar, or pretty much exclusively focused on solar, but the investment tax credit does cover like a lot of other energy incentive programs and credits. So just kind of keep an eye out if you're looking for other types of renewable energy products or projects that elected pay might be available too. So it is nice that it does cover a lot of programs as well as part of the Inflation Reduction Act.
Okay. All right, so let's switch gears now and talk case study. Let's do some practical analysis. So Lewiston Florida School District, you know, was a pretty representative engagement for us in the exempt world. You know, we have built a number of school district projects over the years. We've also built a number of municipal solar projects over the years, and they all shared one common theme. And that theme was none of the exempt organizations own the solar assets. It just did not make sense for them because they could not utilize the value of the investment tax credit. So there was always third-party ownership, meaning that Montante Solar or a company like ours would step in, own the assets, and then sell the electricity to a school district or to a local government. Loopport's interesting because, you know, we started this project pre-Inflation Reduction Act and are finishing it with post-Inflation Reduction Act, where they're going to receive the benefits of the tax credit. I want to show and share with you what this project now means to Looport on a pre and post basis. Just a little FYI, Lewiston Florida School District based in Lewiston, Edward County. It's actually where I grew up, you know, I attended Looport, so it's actually nice to have the opportunity to go back and revisit. This is what we were hired to do for Looport. We were hired to build a $1.4 million solar project spread across 2 different buildings on the Looport campus. In aggregate, we installed about 1,750 solar panels across the elementary school and across the high school. The elementary school project was a little bit bigger, about a 600 kW project, while the high school project was a 400 kW project. Together, they aggregate to about 1 megawatt of solar energy. This is what the reality is for this project. When we started this project, this was the perspective of the economics from Lewiston Florida Central School District on the left. The state did provide, in both cases, an incentive, a cash incentive valued at $350,000. Okay, that reduced the net investment for Looport to just over $1 million for the project on the pre-Inflation Reduction Act basis. That provided them a 9.5 year payback period on the solar project. The energy savings, I can't remember exactly what it is, but I think it's about $110,000 a year or so. What that equates to is a 9.5 year payback. Last October, I believe, Congress passed the Inflation Reduction Act, and the economics of this project changed dramatically overnight. This is what it looks like today. The project costs are exactly the same. However, NYSERDA is going to provide the same amount of cash. However, the IRS is going to cut a check to the district for $430,000. This is found money for the district. So that in essence is reducing Newport's net investment down to $620,000. It was just over $1 million. Now it's closer to $620,000. In essence, it's reducing the payback period to 5.5 years, almost cutting it in half. So if you're an exempt organization, my general guidance 2 years ago would have been, yes, we can build you a solar project, but you're probably not going to own it. We'll own it on your behalf. Our guidance today is, in most cases, or in many cases, it might make good sense to look long and hard at owning the asset outright. Over the long term, it provides the best value. If your organization is able to do that, and the Inflation Reduction Act really makes it that option a great option to have. So, any questions? It's been, we have about 100 people online, and it's been pretty quiet on the Q&A so far. And I don't know if people are just sleeping or they're ready to get into their weekend. But I wanted to make sure that this was abundantly clear what the impact is for the IRA for an exempt organization, like I think most of you represent here today.
I'm not seeing any yet in the chat or in the Q&A. Hopefully everything's just been really clear so far.
Let's move on to our fourth polling question. Does the new Inflation Reduction Act elective pay for the investment tax credit make you more open to exploring solar options for your organization?
All right, about another 10 seconds, everyone.
Okay, that's the answer we were looking for. Okay, well, we're coming closer to the end here. So let's jump into some of the conclusions and takeaways for what we've covered here so far today. The first is something that, Megan kind of glossed over relatively quick. I think it's an important point. You can do the math any number of ways. The investment tax credit is almost always going to give you a better outcome than the production tax credit for solar projects in the Northeast United States. The PTC works well for wind, doesn't work well for solar, especially in the Northeast. Go for the ITC. That's what you want to do. Project ownership implications. So we talked about this. I talked about this a few moments ago. In the past, exempt organizations were seldom the owners of their solar projects. What we're going to see and what we expect to see on a going forward basis is that exempt organizations are going to have a much bigger reason to own these assets outright at the end of the day. So this is, I think, good for the industry. Direct ownership, removes a lot of transaction expenses. It removes a lot of professional expenses. It takes the lawyers out of things, and just makes things much easier and more cost effective on a going forward basis. From a payback period perspective, exempt organizations, traditionally had pretty lousy payback periods for solar projects. Usually, 9+ years, if not longer. But what we're seeing now is that if you're operating an exempt organization and are interested in solar, that solar project is probably going to deliver you a payback period of between 5 and 6 years. That's a game changer, a big game changer. Another takeaway is that there are off-the-rack incentives available from New York State as well as from at the federal level. But look for the adders, and there are a lot of different adders out there. We touched on some of the key ones today, but there are more. And if you work with organizations like Lumsden or Montante, I know we'll be able to identify everything out there for you. But the secret sauce is in identifying adders and looking for opportunities to really juice your financial returns on these projects. And then the final point I'll make is for K-12 districts. I'm not sure how many folks on the line today are coming from the K-12 or higher education world, specifically K-12. Building aid is an absolute wonder for this stuff. What we left out of the Lew-Port case study is the whole impact of building aid. Once you put building aid on top of that, the payback period for Lew-Port is probably closer to 1.5 years. If you're a school district and you have feasibility to build solar, it's a slam dunk investment, an investment that you'll require very little local share and will generate savings for decades to come. So K-12 school districts have an especially ripe opportunity given the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act, and that's something that if you weren't aware of before, you should be aware of today. Okay, I think we have one final polling question. And this one's kind of a softball question. Would you be interested in another webinar to learn more about other energy incentives and tax credits for your organization?
So Dan, you're offering to speak at next year's conference with updates?
I'll block my calendar now, no problem.
Okay, you're booked. All right, we'll give this another 10 seconds. It looks like everyone, we're in the home stretch, so everyone was quick to reply here. All right, I'm going to end the poll. We'll share the results.
Right, beautiful. All right, so the last slide I have is more or less an appendix, and I believe that each of you will receive a copy of this presentation. Just some additional rules of thumb. We've talked and focused mostly on the financial aspects of solar projects today. The reality is that from a facilities perspective or plant operations perspective, there's a whole other host of issues to consider. This is just kind of a primer for those types of questions. And at the end of the day, obviously this is construction and there's the reality of engineering a system that's compatible with your building and your structure. And this appendix providing additional rules of thumb is just a starting point. So it's really more an FYI that you can take back to your larger organization and do with it what you please. But hopefully this does provide some incremental value as you think about various ways to advance either your ESG objectives or just simply looking for cost savings associated with your energy procurement. Wanted to provide you a pretty good overview of what the ins and outs of that would be. So I hope that you've had gained some insight on how renewable energy projects work in New York today, and can find some appropriate use for this in your organization. I know Megan and myself would be happy to take any questions offline or right now. It's been a real pleasure to meet with the group today.
Thanks, Dan. Does anyone have any questions before we wrap this up? Okay, I am not seeing any happen in the chat. Okay. Well, thank you, Dan and Megan, for that presentation. Thank all of you for joining our virtual exempt conference. We did, by the way, poll everyone, as you may recall, after our last conference to see if you preferred to remain virtual post-COVID or be in person. And it was relatively split, but a bit heavier on the virtual, which is why we are still presenting this virtually. I don't know if maybe it's easier for people to schedule when it's parts of 2 mornings instead of one entire day. So we appreciate all input, and we do take that into consideration every year when preparing for this conference. So again, please fill out your survey forms. You should get one as soon as this session closes, and please provide any suggestions or comments in there so we can help continue to make this a great conference. As Maria had mentioned, you will receive your CPE certificates within 30 days. It comes from Prolera is the name of this company and service we use for that. All presenters' presentations that have been approved to be shared will be on our website. And I know Dan and Megan were happy to share this one, so that one will be up by tomorrow if it is not already. Conference bios are all on our website as well. I think that is everything I needed to say. Maria, did I miss anything?
Nope, that's it. That's great. Thanks again to
Oh.
everyone.
Okay, thank you all very much. Thank you again, Dan and Megan. I hope everyone has a good weekend. I know it's a bye week, but go Bills, and thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye then.